3 Apache sisters Naya, Syra, and Luma appeared at my lonely ranch. Before I could speak, they said, "We came to have sex with you." My heart froze. That night changed everything. A year later, Naya returned, carrying a secret. She smiled, but there was something unsaid. All she whispered was, "Some things you can't know, yet." The ranch looked the same, but nothing was the same. The truth about Naya and the child she carried will shatter everything. Watch till the end. You won't believe what happens next. The wind hadn't dared to stir that evening, as if the ranch itself was holding its breath. From the ridge above, 3 figures appeared, moving with a confidence that seemed almost unreal. The lonely rancher James squinted through the fading light. His heart skipped. It wasn't the horses, the fences, or the dust that made him uneasy. It was the women. 3 Apache sisters, standing like living flames against the horizon. Before he could even speak, one of them stepped forward. Her dark eyes locked onto his, sharp and unyielding. "We came to have sex with you," she said, her voice calm but loaded with intent. The words hit him like a bullet. James froze. The world narrowed until it was just him, the 3 sisters, and the electricity crackling in the space between them. He wanted to speak, to ask how they had found him, why they had chosen his lonely ranch in Texas of all places. But his voice failed. The other 2 sisters, Syra and Luma, moved closer, their gazes equally intense, each radiating a dangerous magnetism. Every instinct screamed that he should turn and run. Every desire whispered that he should stay. And in that silence, the desert seemed to shrink around him, containing this moment, this impossible moment, where the ordinary rules no longer applied. Naya, the first sister, tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she already knew the answer to. "Don't be afraid," she said softly. "We won't hurt you unless you want us to." Her words were a challenge and a promise. James felt the ground under his boots shift, though he knew it hadn't. Something about her made the air itself shimmer with tension. The sisters stepped onto the ranch, their movements fluid, almost predatory, yet mesmerizing. Sarah's laughter, low and teasing, bounced off the barn walls. Luma's quiet, smoldering. Gaze seemed to pierce through him, reading thoughts he didn't even know he had. James was no stranger to women, but none had ever moved through his life with such certainty, with such raw power. It was intoxicating and terrifying. As they circled him, each sister revealed glimpses of herself. Naya spoke of distant lands, of things she had seen and endured, each word hinting at danger, adventure, and secrets. Sarah teased him, testing boundaries, her smile daring him to follow. Luma remained still, a quiet storm, her silence more demanding than words. The night had begun, and with it, a dance of tension and desire that pulled him deeper than he had ever imagined. The ranch, once a sanctuary of routine and solitude, became a stage of unpredictability. Every creak of the floorboards, every flutter of the curtains seemed amplified, as if the house itself had become complicit in this strange seduction. James's pulse raced. He felt both alive and unmoored, caught in the gravity of 3 women whose intentions he couldn't fully read, but whose presence he couldn't resist. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning. At one point, Naya leaned close, her breath warm against his ear. "Some things are meant to happen only once," she whispered. The words wrapped around him, heavy and intoxicating, carrying a thrill that bordered on terror. In that instant, he realized the night would change him forever. Sarah moved behind him, brushing her hand along his shoulder, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Luma's eyes met his again, steady and unblinking, and for a fleeting moment, he swore he glimpsed something in her gaze, something beyond desire, an unspoken warning, a secret lurking beneath the surface. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving him aching with curiosity and longing. By the time dawn threatened the horizon, the sisters had left, fading into the shadows as mysteriously as they had arrived. James stood alone, the ranch silent once more, yet nothing felt the same. The memory of their voices, their laughter, the way they had looked at him, lingered like fire. He knew he had been marked. Something fundamental had shifted, and the world he had known quiet, predictable, safe was gone forever. And yet, beneath the thrill and confusion, a seed of dread had been planted. What had they left behind? Was it just the memory of passion, or had the sisters brought something else with them? Something hidden, something that would return one day, carrying consequences he could not yet imagine. James didn't know it yet, but the story of that night was only beginning. One of the sisters would return. One would carry a secret so profound that it would shatter everything he thought he knew about life, love, and the world itself. And when that day came, nothing, not even desire, would prepare him for the truth. The ranch felt hollow without them. James wandered through the fields, the weight of their absence pressing against him like a storm cloud. Every corner of his home whispered their laughter, every shadow hinted at their presence. He had never known such a mixture of fear and longing. The night of their arrival had changed something inside him, something raw, unyielding, impossible to ignore. Weeks passed, yet the sisters remained absent, as though they had vanished into thin air. And yet, their impact lingered. James found himself speaking aloud when he was alone, recalling Naya's sharp gaze, Sarah's teasing smile, Luma's quiet intensity. The rancher realized he was obsessed, haunted not by spirits, but by desire itself. Then, one evening, the impossible happened. A figure appeared at the edge of the pasture, a woman moving with purpose, her silhouette familiar even before she spoke. It was Naya. She stopped at the fence, her eyes glinting with secrets she refused to share. "I've come back," she said, her voice soft yet commanding. "But not for the reasons you think." James's heart thundered. He wanted to run, to retreat into the comfort of solitude, but every part of him drew closer. Naya's presence was both a promise and a threat, intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. He could see the tension in her posture, the way her fingers brushed the railing of the fence, as though controlling some invisible current between them. "I've been waiting," James said, his voice betraying the mixture of relief and dread twisting through him. But even as he spoke, he realized that waiting meant something entirely different to her. She didn't belong to his world, not entirely. She belonged somewhere between fire and shadow, desire and danger. Naya stepped closer. The moonlight caught the curve of her face, highlighting features that were impossibly delicate, yet undeniably fierce. "Some things are not meant to be spoken," she whispered, almost to herself. "Some things are meant to be experienced." The words sent a shiver through him, awakening a part of James that had been dormant for years, a part that craved the unknown, the forbidden, the dangerous. Over the next days, the sisters' presence became a series of subtle invasions. Sarah appeared while he worked in the barn, laughter spilling over his shoulder as her fingertips traced the edge of his arm. Luma lingered at the doorway, her gaze a silent command, her proximity enough to make his blood run hot. And Naya was everywhere in spirit, every glance, every movement loaded with promise. But with each encounter came a whisper of unease. The sisters spoke of things that didn't make sense, ancient rituals, distant lands, secrets hidden in plain sight. James began to suspect they were more than women drawn by desire. They were something else, something larger, something with purpose he could not yet fathom. The suspense grew, the tension coiling tighter with each passing night. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naya pulled him into the orchard behind the house. Her eyes were serious now, shadows flickering across her face. "You need to understand," she said, "what happened that night. It was not an accident. We were sent, and it's only the beginning." James's breath caught. The sensual thrill of the past weeks collided with a sudden surge of dread. He realized with a jolt that the night of passion had been part of a plan, orchestrated with precision beyond his comprehension. Desire had been a tool, and he had been caught completely unaware. Sarah's laughter echoed from somewhere behind the trees, teasing, insistent. Luma's presence at his side made the air feel heavier, charged with an energy that was not entirely human. James's mind raced. What were they planning? What part of him did they truly want? And what did Naya mean by, "It's only the beginning"? That night, James lay awake in his bed, the orchard's shadows bleeding into the corners of the room. His body still remembered every touch, every whispered word, but his mind could not rest. He felt as though he were on the edge of discovery and destruction, and the line between the two was perilously thin. Something was coming, something he could not yet see, but could already feel. And then came the whisper he wasn't supposed to hear, carried on the wind through the cracked window. Naya's voice, distant yet clear. "Some things you cannot know yet, but soon everything will be revealed." A chill ran through James, not of cold, but of anticipation and fear. Desire, he realized, had become a trap. The sisters' intentions were layered, complex, and beyond his ability to predict. The ranch, once a sanctuary of loneliness, had become a theater of intrigue where passion and danger danced together, and the next act promised revelations he could barely imagine. By dawn, he knew one thing. Naya, Sarah, and Luma had come not to satisfy longing alone. They had come to change him, to pull him into a reality where nothing was as it seemed. And somewhere in that change lay a secret that would shatter everything. He thought he knew about life, love, and the quiet world of his ranch. James had been seduced, yes, but now he was ensnared. And the true story was only just beginning. The dawn came too quickly, painting the ranch in pale, unforgiving light. James stirred, half expecting to see the sisters lingering in the orchard, teasing him with their presence. But the space was empty. The air felt heavier somehow, as though their energy had left a tangible residue, a warning he couldn't yet decipher. The memory of Naya's whispered words, "Some things you cannot know," yet echoed in his mind, and a sense of unease settled in his chest like a stone. Days turned into weeks. The sisters had vanished again, leaving James in a state between obsession and dread. He wandered the fields, searching for signs, scanning the horizon as though they might appear from the shadows at any moment. Every corner of the ranch reminded him of their touch, the curve of the barn door, the worn fence rails where they had leaned, the orchard where Naya had spoken of beginnings and secrets. And then came the letters. At first, he thought it was his imagination, small, almost imperceptible notes left in the places they had been. Tucked under a fence post, rolled into the latch of the barn door, hidden beneath his pillow. Each one carried only a few words, carefully chosen. Wait. Patience. Soon. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, almost hypnotic, and it pulled at him in ways he didn't want to acknowledge. James tried to focus on the ranch, on the life he had built in solitude. But nothing was the same. He felt as though the world had shifted during their absence. Every sound was amplified, every shadow suspicious, and every moment of silence unbearable. Nights were the hardest. He would lie awake, imagining Naya's gaze, Sarah's laughter, Luma's quiet intensity. The memory of desire had become a ghost, haunting him relentlessly. Then one evening, a stranger arrived at the ranch, a man whose presence was so out of place that James instinctively reached for the rifle by the doorway. The visitor was thin, dressed in dark, worn clothing, and his eyes were sharp, assessing. "You're James, aren't you?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost too calm, like someone who had walked through fire and survived. "Yes," James replied cautiously. "Who are you?" The man's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I'm someone who knows about them." The words made James's stomach drop. The sisters. Naya, Sarah, Luma. They're not what you think. They never were. James felt his pulse spike. He had suspected as much, the suspicion gnawing at him like a slow poison, but hearing it aloud filled him with both fear and exhilaration. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice tight. "They have a purpose," the man said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. "And it involves you." His eyes flicked to the horizon. The night they arrived. It was only the beginning. What they've left behind, the bonds they've created, the child Naya carries, it will change everything. James felt the room tilt. Child? The word echoed like a bell tolling in the silence of the ranch. He had imagined passion, desire, danger. But a child? His mind raced, grappling with the impossible. Was it literal, or was this another layer of mystery, another riddle wrapped in seduction? Before he could ask more, the man vanished into the night, leaving behind only a single card with a symbol etched into it. 3 interlocking triangles. James had never seen anything like it. The symbol pulsed in his mind, a silent, urgent warning, and he understood that the sister's story was far from over. Days later, James began noticing subtle changes around the ranch. The livestock behaved strangely, the horses restless and alert, their eyes flicking toward empty corners. Even the wind seemed to carry whispers, soft and unintelligible, like a language he had almost heard before. It was as if the world itself recognized the sister's influence and responded in kind. And then came the dream. Naya appeared, her face closer than reality, her eyes deeper than memory. "Some things are inevitable," she whispered, and he felt the words reverberate through his chest. "You will not understand yet, but you must prepare." The dream left him trembling, caught between fear and longing, and he awoke to the sense that something monumental was approaching. The days blurred together as he searched for answers, combing through journals, old Apache stories, anything that might hint at what the sisters were, what they had left behind, and why it involved him. The suspense mounted with every discovery or every failure to understand. And then one morning, he saw her. Naya, standing at the edge of the pasture alone, her expression calm but unreadable. She was carrying herself differently now, a secret hidden in the curve of her belly. James froze, caught between disbelief and awe. The truth he had been dreading and longing for had arrived in the form of her presence, and he knew, instinctively, that everything about his life was about to shatter. The ranch, once a refuge of solitude, had become a stage for secrets, desire, and forces he could not yet comprehend. The sisters' plan, whatever it truly was unfolding, and James was caught in its center. He realized that the night of passion, the weeks of obsession, the whispered warnings, they had all led to this moment. The next act would not be simple. The stakes were higher than desire. The stakes were life, legacy, and a truth so shocking that it would redefine everything he thought he knew. And as Naya's eyes met his across the field, dark and mysterious and filled with promise, James understood. One undeniable fact: nothing and no one would ever be the same again. James had been waiting for this moment without fully knowing it. The horizon shimmered, not with light, but with the sudden impossible awareness that someone was coming. And then she appeared near, alone, poised, carrying herself with a quiet intensity that made the ranch feel smaller, more intimate, more dangerous. She moved like a shadow sliding across the land, but there was a substance to her presence, weight and meaning that pressed against James's chest. He could see it immediately. Something had changed. The curve of her belly was subtle, almost hidden beneath her clothing, yet undeniable. His heart stopped. Questions collided with emotions he hadn't yet processed: joy, fear, desire, and confusion. The child she carried was more than a secret. It was a revelation that shattered every expectation he had ever held. "You came back," he said, voice tight with disbelief. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Naya smiled, a slow, enigmatic curve of lips that didn't reach her eyes. "Some truths aren't meant to be spoken until the time is right," she said. Her gaze held him captive, as if she could see through the layers of his mind, reading both his longing and his fear. You'll understand soon enough, but for now, some things must remain hidden. James wanted to ask more, to unravel the mysteries that had haunted him for months, but the intensity of her presence left him mute. There was a fire in her eyes, a command in her voice that made every rational thought crumble. Desire and dread intertwined, pulling him closer to a reality he could neither control nor escape. The sisters' influence on the ranch was subtle but undeniable. The horses, once restless, now grazed quietly, yet their eyes followed Naya with an intelligence that unsettled him. The wind carried whispers that seemed to echo her thoughts, brushing against him like a warning. Every step she took, every movement of her hands felt purposeful, calculated, and yet intimate in a way that made James ache with anticipation. "You've waited," she said softly, almost a statement, almost an accusation. "And I've been gone for a reason. But now it begins." Her words were both invitation and decree. James felt the pull of her presence like gravity itself, and he followed her to the orchard where the last encounter had left its mark. The trees stood like silent witnesses, their shadows stretching across the ground, mingling with the rising tension. Naya turned to him there, her eyes revealing a depth he hadn't dared imagine. "The child," he began, but she shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered. "First, you must understand the truth about us, about me, about what we carry." She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. Her breath brushed against his ear, and every nerve in his body lit up. "The night we came to your ranch," she said, "it wasn't chance. It was deliberate. Our lives, our purpose. It intertwines with yours in ways you cannot yet see." James's mind reeled. Desire had drawn him into a trap, but the trap was far more intricate than he had imagined. Nia's touch was both gentle and commanding, leaving him suspended between pleasure and fear. Every whisper of her voice, every brush of her skin, hinted at the vast secret she carried. A secret that involved him, the ranch, and the child she bore. Then she stepped back, just enough to let the distance create tension again. The gap between them a charged space humming with anticipation. "There are forces," she said, her tone urgent yet calm, "that you cannot fight, that you cannot understand yet. But you will be part of it. You are necessary." James's head spun. Necessary for what? He demanded, though even as he spoke, he felt powerless to push the question further. The ranch, the fields, the orchard, they all seemed suspended in time, waiting for an answer that would come only when the world was ready. Naya's eyes softened for a fleeting moment. "To protect what comes next," she said. And with that, she placed her hand over her belly, the subtle weight of life pressed between them. "This child, it is more than you or I. It carries a destiny that will change everything." A silence followed, profound and electric. James felt the magnitude of her words settle into his chest, heavy with responsibility, with fear, with desire. The intimacy between them was no longer just physical, it was cosmic, unavoidable. Fated.Saira and Luma appeared then, emerging from the shadows of the trees. Their presence amplified the tension, their eyes shimmering with knowing and power. Sarah's smile was mischievous, teasing, yet filled with a warning. Luma's gaze was steady, intense, unyielding. Together, the sisters formed a triangle of influence and control that left James suspended in awe and terror. "Everything is aligned now," Naya said, her voice soft but unbreakable. "The time has come for choices to be made, for paths to be set. And you, James, are at the center." He realized that the ranch he had thought was a refuge of solitude had become a nexus of desire, mystery, and destiny. The women who had entered his life months ago had not come to satisfy mere longing. They had come to change him, to draw him into a reality he could not yet comprehend. And the child, the secret he now faced, was the final thread, pulling him irrevocably into a story larger than himself. As the sisters closed the distance around him, James knew one undeniable truth: the night of passion, the longing, the obsession, and the whispers of secrets had all led to this moment. His life, once predictable, once quiet, had been shattered, and there was no going back. And somewhere beneath the desire and the fear, he understood that what came next would not only define him, but the destiny of everything the sisters had brought with them, especially Naya's child. James woke to a silence so complete it felt unnatural, as if the ranch itself were holding its breath. Something had shifted overnight. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with a presence he could not see but could feel, ominous, undeniable, and terrifying. He rubbed his eyes, sensing movement in the corner of the barn. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending toward him like they had a life of their own, and then she appeared, Naya. But this time, there was no teasing, no whispered seduction. She stood at the edge of the barn, the moonlight catching the subtle curve of her belly, her eyes darker, deeper, holding secrets that seemed to warp reality itself. "It's time," she said, voice steady, almost commanding. "You need to understand everything." James's pulse surged. He had anticipated questions, explanations, some revelation, but nothing had prepared him for the gravity in her tone. Desire had become dread. Fascination had become fear. And he realized that the child she carried was not merely a secret, it was a fulcrum, a point on which the world had shifted without his knowledge. Naya moved closer, her hand resting lightly on her stomach. "The night we arrived at your ranch, it was not random. We were chosen. You were chosen. And what you think you understand about us, about me, is only the beginning." James tried to grasp her meaning, but his mind faltered. "Chosen for what?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze pierced him. "To protect what is coming. The child I carry. It is not ordinary. It holds knowledge, power, and a destiny that extends beyond our lives. Beyond this land. Beyond this world." James felt the ground tilt beneath him. The ranch, the familiar fields, the quiet solitude, all of it seemed irrelevant in that moment. Desire, which had drawn him to Naya, now seemed trivial in comparison to the immensity of the truth she revealed. And then the sisters appeared, emerging from the shadows as if summoned by the weight of her words. Sarah's eyes sparkled with mischievous intelligence, but Luma's gaze was unyielding, filled with a knowledge that chilled him. "Everything has led to this moment," Luma said, her voice low and certain. "The child is the key, the connection, and the test. James, your role is not optional." James staggered, overwhelmed by the intensity of their presence and the impossible weight of their revelation. I don't understand," he whispered, fear and fascination entwined in every syllable. "What is this child?" Naya's expression softened, but there was no doubt in her voice. "The child carries the lineage of something older than you, or I, older than our world. Its existence is both a gift and a responsibility, and it must be protected at all costs." She paused, letting the words settle. "We came to you because you are capable, because you are needed, and because you have no choice." James's mind reeled. Every instinct, every shred of logic, fought against the reality before him. But deep inside, he knew she was speaking the truth. Desire had been the lure, the initial hook, but the stakes had escalated far beyond passion. He was part of something immense, something terrifying, something that could not be ignored. The sisters closed in around him, forming a circle of power, desire, and mystery. Their presence was magnetic, overwhelming. Sarah's laughter was now layered with gravity, hinting at knowledge he could barely imagine. Luma's stare was unwavering, challenging him to rise to the reality they had thrust upon him. And Naya. Naya's calm authority and hidden vulnerability made him ache with longing, even as his mind screamed at the danger. "You felt it," Naya said softly, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "The connection. The pull. It's not just desire, James. It's destiny. And destiny has a price." James swallowed hard. "And if I fail?" "You won't fail," Luma said, her voice cold yet certain. "But there will be sacrifices. And truths you cannot yet bear to see." The weight of their revelation pressed against him like a physical force. The child was the focal point of something monumental, something entwined with fate, power, and the mysterious intentions of the sisters. James realized that everything he had felt, everything he had feared or desired, was preparation for this moment. The revelation, the responsibility, the inevitability of his role. Naya stepped closer again, her hand over her belly, warmth radiating outward, pulling him in. "The next steps will not be easy," she whispered, "and the path will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. But this is only the beginning. We have chosen you, James, not just for passion, not just for desire, but for what must come next." A tremor ran through him, fear, awe, and an uncontainable yearning all at once. He understood that the night of seduction, the weeks of obsession, the months of uncertainty, it had all led to this revelation. The stakes were no longer just personal. They were cosmic, profound, and unavoidable. And as the sisters surrounded him, the ranch seemed to shimmer with an unseen energy, a pulse that matched the unspoken heartbeat of the child Naya carried. James realized that he was not just involved in a story of desire and mystery. He was at the center of something monumental. A story that would ripple across lives, across time, and across a destiny far greater than he could yet comprehend. He took a breath, steadying himself as the enormity of the moment washed over him. Naya's hand rested on his chest, and the unspoken promise of danger, desire, and devotion flowed between them. The child, the secret, the key, the future was theirs together. And James knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing, not passion, not fear, not solitude, would ever prepare him for what was coming next. Prepare him for what was coming next. The ranch was silent, but the silence carried weight. James stood in the middle of the pasture, heart hammering, senses sharpened as if the land itself had become alive. The moon hung low, casting a silver sheen over the fields, illuminating the three sisters as they approached in a formation both deliberate and unstoppable. Naya was at the center, her presence commanding. The subtle curve of her belly now undeniable. A secret that pulsed with unseen power. "You've waited," Naya said, her voice steady yet charged with something deeper than words. "And now, the time has come." James felt a shiver race down his spine. Desire, danger, obsession, all of it had built to this single moment. But beneath the familiar tension was a new layer, the knowledge that what was about to happen would change everything he knew, everything he had been, and everything he would become. Sarah's eyes glinted, sharp and knowing. Luma's gaze was unyielding, intense, as if she could peer directly into his soul. "You understand," Luma said, her voice low and certain, "that nothing here is by chance. What we have created, what is about to come into the world, demands courage, sacrifice, and clarity of heart." James nodded, though his throat was tight. He had followed them through desire and mystery, fear and longing. Now he realized the full scale of what they had drawn him into. The child Naya carried was not just a child, it was a force, a pivot upon which fate itself might turn. Naya stepped closer, and James felt the pull between them like gravity. "This child," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "is the culmination of everything we are. It holds knowledge, instincts, and power far beyond your imagination. It will be loved, protected, and feared. And you are its anchor." James swallowed hard, the enormity pressing on him. He wanted to resist, to retreat, but every part of him was ensnared in the sister's orbit. Desire had been the lure, mystery the cage, and now destiny had claimed him entirely. The air shifted, subtle but undeniable. Shadows lengthened unnaturally across the pasture, and the moonlight seemed to bend around them. James felt a pulse, deep and rhythmic, emanating from Naya, from the child, from something older and larger than the ranch, older than time itself. The sensation was intoxicating and terrifying. "What do you mean older than time?" he whispered, his voice barely carrying across the still air. Naya's gaze softened, yet her expression remained serious. "This child carries the first memory of a lineage that predates humanity, a consciousness older than the stars themselves. What you feel as tension, as desire, as destiny, that is only the beginning. Its arrival will awaken forces you cannot yet comprehend." Sarah and Luma moved, circling James in a pattern that felt ritualistic, hypnotic, binding him to the moment, to them, to what was coming. James realized he had been prepared in ways he hadn't understood. The passion, the nights of tension, the whispered secrets, it had all been training. Conditioning, initiation. Naya reached for his hands, placing them gently over her belly. James felt warmth, life, and something else, a surge of energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. It was not human, yet it was intimate, electric, undeniable. The child inside her moved, subtly, almost knowingly, as if acknowledging him, claiming him as part of its existence. "Do you see now?" Naya asked, her eyes luminous with emotion and mystery. "You were never just a participant. You were chosen to be part of this, to guide, to protect, and to witness. And now, there is no turning back." The pulse beneath his hands grew stronger, and James felt the world shift. Time seemed to fracture, moments stretching and collapsing in on themselves. He glimpsed visions, not clear, but enough. A future reshaped, a lineage awakening, and a force older than comprehension moving through the child he now understood. He was bound to protect. Sarah's voice broke the spell, low and teasing, yet edged with gravity. "We warned you. Desire is only the beginning. Knowledge, responsibility, and destiny follow. And you, James, are ready whether you know it or not." The ranch, the land, the night itself seemed to bow to the unfolding moment. James felt awe, fear, longing, and love all intertwined. The sisters had not just entered his life. They had rewritten it, realigned it with something extraordinary. Every moment of desire, obsession, and suspense had led here, to the revelation of the impossible. Naya leaned close, whispering into his ear, "This child will change everything. You will be a part of it. And when the world sees what has been born from the union of choice, courage, and desire, it will never be the same again." The sisters formed a circle around him, and the pulse of life beneath Naya's hands synchronized with his heartbeat. James felt a connection, cosmic and intimate, that defied explanation. Desire and destiny, passion and power, mystery and revelation. They all collided in a moment that felt infinite. And then, as the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, the truth crystallized. The night of passion, the months of obsession, the whispered secrets, all of it had been preparation. The child Naya carried was not just a child. It was a catalyst, a force, a beginning. And James was no longer a lonely rancher. He was the anchor, the witness, and the protector of something that could change not just his life, but the very fabric of existence. The sisters smiled, a mixture of triumph, mischief, and tenderness. Naya placed her hand over his once more. "It begins now," she said. "And you are ready." James inhaled deeply, heart and mind fully alive. The world as he knew it had ended. And from its ashes, something extraordinary had begun. The shocking story of James and the Apache sisters is just getting started. Subscribe now and hit the bell to follow every secret, every twist, every shocking turn. Every shocking turn.